Single dad gets trapped in an elevator with a young CEO, and she falls for him. Just before we start, drop a flag emoji that represents your country. The elevator smelled like cold metal and expensive perfume. Oliver Mercer noticed it the moment he stepped inside. That particular kind of fragrance that costs more than his monthly grocery bill. The kind that announces power before a word is spoken. He pressed the button for the 31st floor, shifted the weight of his laptop bag on his shoulder, and kept his eyes on the brushed steel doors as they slid shut. He had learned a long time ago that men like him were invisible in buildings like this one. Gleaming lobbies, marble floors, security desks staffed by people in blazers who smiled at certain badges and looked through certain others. Oliver wore a contractor's badge. White background. No gold trim. The kind that got you a polite nod and nothing more. He was fine with that. He had stopped needing to be seen by people like this a long time ago. The woman who stepped in just before the doors closed didn't look at him either. She was on her phone. Or rather, she was being consumed by it, her thumb scrolling with the practiced urgency of someone whose inbox never reached zero. Oliver registered her in the peripheral way he registered most things. Mid-30s, dark blazer, heels that clicked like a countdown, the particular set of jaw and shoulder that belonged to people who ran things. He'd seen that posture before. Not here. Somewhere else. Somewhere he no longer talked about. He looked back at the doors. The elevator rose. Floor 7. Floor 12. Floor 19. Then the lights flickered. And the world stopped. The drop wasn't violent. It was almost gentle. A soft lurch, a groan from somewhere deep in the building's mechanical spine. And then stillness. Complete, absolute stillness. The kind that makes your stomach understand something your brain hasn't caught up to yet. The emergency lighting kicked in a half-second later, casting everything in a pale amber glow that made the elevator look like the inside of an old photograph. Oliver felt the shift in air pressure, felt the silence become a different kind of silence. He checked the panel, all floor buttons dark, the emergency button blinking a slow red pulse. And then he did what he always did in broken situations. He assessed. Power failure. Likely building-wide based on the quality of the flicker. Backup systems engaged on critical infrastructure. Elevators locked to safety mode. They were somewhere between floors 22 and 23 based on his count. The shaft would hold. The cables were fine. A true cable failure sounded nothing like this. They were stopped, not falling. There was a difference, and it mattered. He pressed the emergency button, held it for 3 seconds, released, waited. A crackle, then a voice. Distant, slightly panicked. The voice of someone at a security desk who had also just lost half their screens. This is building security. We're aware of the situation. We have technicians en route. Please remain calm. Copy that, Oliver said. 2 people, elevator 7, somewhere between 22 and 23. No injuries. We're stable, take your time. A pause, as if the voice on the other end hadn't expected calm. Understood, sir. We'll have you out as soon as... No rush. He released the button. Then he turned. The woman was pressed against the back wall of the elevator with both hands flat against the steel. Phone clutched to her chest, breathing in a way that wasn't quite breathing. Short, controlled, the kind of control that is itself a warning sign. Her eyes were moving too fast, cataloging the ceiling, the doors, the gap at the bottom of the doors, the ceiling again. Oliver had seen that pattern before too. Not panic yet, the thing that comes just before panic. The last few seconds of a person holding themselves together by sheer will before the will runs out. He knew better than to say calm down. He knew better than to move too fast. He sat down on the floor of the elevator, just like that. Crossed one ankle over the other, set his bag beside him, leaned his back against the wall, and looked up at her with the expression of a man who had nowhere else to be. It's a power failure, he said. Probably a transformer. This building has redundant safety locks on all vertical transport. We're not going anywhere we don't want to go. The cables are holding, the shaft is solid, we're just waiting. She looked at him. For the first time, actually looked at him. How do you know that? Because if the cables had failed, we'd know. Her jaw was still tight. How long? Depends on whether it's local or grid. Local, maybe 40 minutes. Grid outage could be 2 hours. He paused. But probably 40 minutes. She didn't sit down. But her hands came away from the wall. He didn't push it. Her name was Diana Hale. He didn't know that yet. He would learn it later, the way you learn most important things, gradually in pieces from context rather than introduction. What he knew right now was that she was afraid, and that she was ashamed of being afraid, and that the shame was making the fear worse, which was a feedback loop he recognized from a very different life. He reached into his bag and pulled out a water bottle, held it toward her without a word. She looked at it like it might be a trap. "It's sealed," he said. She took it, cracked it open, drank, and something in her shoulders, not much, just a millimeter or two, descended from where they'd been. Oliver pulled out his phone, not to make a call, but to check the time. 4:47 p.m. Ethan's after-school program ended at 6. He had time. He always made sure he had time. That was the first rule of being a single father. You built margin into everything because the world was going to take some of it from you without asking, and you needed what was left to still be enough. He thought about Ethan. 7 years old, currently in the middle of what he called his volcano phase, which meant that every flat surface in their apartment had at some point hosted a baking soda and vinegar experiment. Oliver had stopped protecting the kitchen table. He had simply accepted that it was a laboratory now and bought a better sponge. The thought settled something in him. It always did. "You do this often?" the woman said. He looked up. "Do what?" "Sit on elevator floors." "First time, actually." He said it straight. No smile, no performance, just the fact. She studied him with the kind of eyes that were used to reading people quickly, used to making fast assessments and filing them under threat or asset or irrelevant. He could see her trying to place him and not quite managing it. "You work here?" she asked. "Third floor. Contractor. I'm doing a security audit on their legacy network infrastructure." He glanced at her badge, clipped to her blazer lapel, gold trim, senior access. "You're on 31? 43, she said. "I was getting on the wrong elevator." He nodded like that explained something. "Diana Hale," she said. Not warmly, more like a statement of record. "Oliver Mercer." She looked at the hand he didn't extend, because he was still sitting on the floor, and then at him, and something shifted in her expression. Not softness, more like recalibration. She sat down, not close. On the opposite wall, back straight, knees together, water bottle in both hands. Still the posture of a CEO, but down on the floor, same level, same amber light. Oliver said nothing. He had learned that silence, offered correctly, was not emptiness. It was room. Some people needed room more than they needed words. He had a feeling Diana Hale had been surrounded by words her entire adult life, presentations, pitches, negotiations, reports, and that what she actually needed right now in this stopped elevator was someone who was simply willing to be present without demanding anything from her. So he was present, and he demanded nothing. The building outside was beginning to understand what had happened. 3 floors above them, in a glass-walled conference room, a meeting of 11 senior executives had gone abruptly dark. Laptops on battery, phones out. Someone was already on with the building manager. Someone else was already composing a furious email to facilities. In the lobby, security was managing a small crowd of people who had been waiting for elevators that were now sealed shut. The little LED displays above each door gone dark and silent. On the 43rd floor, Diana Hale's assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Priya, who had survived 4 years in the job by anticipating things before they happened, had already checked the stairwells, confirmed the CEO's phone was going to voicemail, and was currently on with building security trying to establish which elevator her boss had boarded. Nobody was panicking. Not yet. But nobody was calm either. In the amber-lit box between floors 22 and 23, 2 people sat on the floor across from each other, and the particular quality of their silence was different from the silence everywhere else in the building. Theirs was almost peaceful. "You're not scared," Diana said. It wasn't quite a question. Oliver thought about it honestly, the way he thought about most things. "I've been in situations where fear was useful," he said. "This isn't one of them. We're not in danger. We're inconvenienced." He paused. "There's a difference." She looked at him steadily. "What kind of situations?" He looked back at her, and for just a moment, less than a second, quick enough that she might have imagined it, something moved behind his eyes. Not pain exactly. More like the distant recognition of a country he used to live in. "Old ones," he said. And he looked back at the doors. Diana Hale, who had built a company from 11 employees to 900, who had sat across negotiating tables from people who wanted to break her, who had been called the most composed woman in the industry by 3 separate profiles in 3 separate magazines. Diana Hale found herself wanting to ask the follow-up question. She didn't, but she wanted to, and that, she would think later, was the first sign. 43 minutes. That was how long they were in there. 43 minutes in amber light with a sealed water bottle between them and a city going dark outside the shaft walls. 43 minutes that Oliver would later describe to no one. Because there was no one in his life he described things like this to. 43 minutes that Diana would describe to Priya in a single sentence. It was strange. He was just calm. Just calm. As if calm were a small thing. As if calm in a crisis, in the dark between floors with a stranger. As if calm were something most people had access to and simply chose. Oliver knew different. He knew what calm cost. He knew what it was built on and what it had to be rebuilt on after the foundations cracked. He knew that calm was not the absence of fear. It was the decision, made quietly, in the part of yourself that no one else could reach, that you were going to hold. That you were not going to give the situation more power than it deserved. That you were going to be the steadiest thing in the room, not because you were performing steadiness, but because someone nearby might need it. Ethan had needed it, once, more than once. Oliver held. When the lights came back on, full power, the elevator's floor display blinking back to life, the mechanical systems humming their way back into readiness, Diana stood first, straightened her blazer, checked her phone, which showed 11 missed calls and a small novel's worth of text messages. She took a breath that was almost a sigh and was not quite either. Then she looked down at Oliver, who was still sitting on the floor in no apparent hurry, watching the display count its way upward toward 23. "Thank you," she said. Not warmly, but genuinely. There was a difference. "I didn't do anything," he said. "You stayed calm." "So did you," he said. Eventually. And there it was, a thing that was almost a smile on the face of a woman who didn't smile at strangers on elevator floors, gone as quickly as it came. Professional. Contained. The doors opened on the 23rd floor. She walked out first, turned left toward the stairwell without looking back. Heels clicking that countdown rhythm on marble tile. Oliver stood up, adjusted his bag, looked at the floor where they'd been sitting, 2 slight impressions in the industrial carpet, the empty water bottle she'd left behind. And then he stepped out too, turned right and found the stairwell going down. He had a 7-year-old to pick up. He had volcanoes to supervise. He had, as he always had, exactly enough. The apartment was on the 4th floor of a building that had a broken elevator and a landlord who answered texts about it every 3 to 4 business weeks. Oliver had stopped being bothered by the stairs. Ethan had turned them into a game sometime around his 5th birthday. Each step had a name, a personality, a complex social history that changed depending on Ethan's mood. And now Oliver couldn't climb them without hearing his son's voice narrating the political drama of steps 14 and 15, who had been feuding since March. He was a good kid. He was the best thing Oliver had ever made, and Oliver had made some things in his life that people had once found remarkable. He didn't think about those things much anymore. The after-school program was run by a woman named Mrs. Cafferty, who had been teaching children in some capacity for 31 years, and who looked at Oliver the way good people look at someone they respect without knowing quite why. steadily, with a warmth that had nothing to do with small talk. "He had a good day," she said, when Oliver appeared in the doorway at 5:52. He helped Marcus with his reading, didn't ask for anything in return, just sat with him and helped. Oliver looked across the room at his son, who was crouched over a table with a piece of paper and a crayon, tongue slightly between his teeth in concentration. "He does that," Oliver said. "I know." She paused. "You doing okay? You look like you had a long one. Power outage on a job site, stuck in an elevator for a while." She winced. "Alone?" "No, someone else was in there." He paused. She was scared. "Were you scared?" He thought about it honestly, the way he always did. "No," he said. "I had somewhere to be." Mrs. Cafferty looked at him for a moment, the way people look at something they want to understand, but aren't sure they have the right words for. Then she nodded, like the answer made complete sense, and called Ethan's name. The boy looked up. His face did what his face always did when he saw his father, opened entirely the way a door opens when someone you've been waiting for finally walks through it. "Dad." He was across the room in 6 steps, arms around Oliver's waist, face against his ribs. Oliver put his hand on the back of his son's head. He held. The life was small and it was hard, and Oliver had chosen it. This was the thing that people misunderstood, the few people who knew enough of the story to misunderstand it. They assumed the smallness was something that had happened to him, that the 4th floor walk-up and the contractor badges and the grocery brand cereal and the second-hand books and the carefully budgeted weekends, they assumed all of this was defeat. They assumed Oliver had been somewhere better and fallen. He had been somewhere else. That much was true. But the choice to leave had been his, made clearly, in full knowledge of what it would cost, with a 3-year-old boy asleep in the next room and a set of circumstances that had shown Oliver, with perfect clarity, what actually mattered. What mattered was the boy. What mattered was the kind of man that boy was going to grow up watching. Oliver had made his decision, and he had not looked back. He had looked forward, every morning, at the face of a child who did not know what his father had once been and did not need to know, who only needed to see a man who showed up, who held his word, who was gentle and present and steady, who read to him before bed and packed his lunch and came to every school play and crouched on the kitchen floor to watch volcanoes erupt and never, not once, made the boy feel like a burden. There are men who carry the world and make sure everyone knows the weight. And there are men who carry it quietly, because the carrying is not for show. Oliver was the second kind. That night, after Ethan was asleep, after the volcano cleanup and the chapter of the book about the boy who could talk to machines and the glass of water and the complicated negotiation around exactly how many minutes of the hall light, Oliver sat at his kitchen table with his laptop open and a cup of coffee going cold beside it. The job was technical. Legacy systems, outdated architecture, security vulnerabilities that had been patched over so many times, the original structure underneath was almost unrecognizable. He was good at this. He had always been good at this, finding the thing underneath the thing, the original logic beneath all the accumulated fixes and workarounds, the place where the problem actually lived. He worked quietly. He always worked quietly. Ethan was a light sleeper and the apartment walls were thin, and Oliver had trained himself years ago to move through the world at a low volume. Keyboard strokes measured, voice calls conducted in a near whisper, footsteps learned, the creaking boards memorized and avoided. He inhabited the space around his son like a careful custodian, present without imposing, protective without smothering. It was 10:23 when his phone buzzed. Unknown number, New York area code. He looked at it for a moment, let it ring twice more, then picked up. Mercer. He kept his voice low. Mr. Mercer. A woman's voice. Crisp, controlled, slightly different from how it had sounded in amber light, less frayed at the edges, more professional armor in place. But he recognized it immediately. "This is Diana Hale. I got your number from building security. I hope that's not—" "It's fine," he said. A pause. "I wanted to make sure you got out okay. After the floors reconnected, I realized I didn't see you in the stairwell." "I went down," he said. "You went up. different directions. Right. Another pause. The kind that meant something was being considered. I also wanted to apologize for earlier. I wasn't. She stopped, started again. I'm not usually like that. Like what? Scared. Oliver looked at his coffee cup. Everyone's scared sometimes, he said. The ones who pretend otherwise are usually the most scared of all. Silence on the line, not empty silence. The kind that meant something was being absorbed. You're a contractor? She said. Network security? Infrastructure audit. 3rd floor, Financial Systems Division. How long have you been in the field? He considered the question carefully. Not the answer, the question, the specific phrasing. How long have you been in the field? Not where did you study or what company are you with? The question of someone who was already looking past the badge. A while, he said. I do independent work now. Suits my schedule. Your schedule. I have a son, 7 years old. He said it plainly without apology or explanation. My schedule is built around his. Another pause, longer this time. I see, she said. And her voice had changed, just slightly. Not softer exactly, but recalibrated, as if a variable in a formula had been updated and the output was different now. Was there something specific you needed, Ms. Hale? Diana, she said. And a brief pause, almost imperceptible. The pause of someone who has prepared something and is deciding in real time whether to say it. No, I just wanted to make sure you were all right. She paused once more. You seemed like the kind of person who would say he was fine regardless. Oliver looked at the wall where Ethan's drawings were taped. A row of them. 8 months' worth. A museum of the boy's current obsessions. Volcanoes. Dinosaurs. A series of drawings of the two of them that Ethan called me and Dad doing stuff. I'm fine, Oliver said. Of course you are. And there it was again. That thing that was almost a smile. He could hear it even through a phone call. Even in a controlled professional voice at 10:23 at night. She said goodnight. He set the phone down, looked at the drawings on the wall, looked at his cold coffee, thought about a woman who built companies and managed crises and ran 43 floors of people, calling a contractor at 10 in the evening to make sure he'd gotten out of an elevator. He picked up the coffee, drank it cold, went back to work. The next morning, Oliver dropped Ethan at school at 7:45. Ethan had strong opinions about the order of operations. First the hug at the gate, then the hand wave from the doorway, then Oliver was allowed to leave. The ritual was inviolable. Oliver honored it absolutely, not because he had to, but because he understood, at a level he couldn't have fully articulated, that rituals were how a child built a map of the world. That every consistent thing was a point of navigation. That you gave your child every reliable landmark you could. Because the world was going to move enough things without your help. He arrived at the building at 8:20. The lobby felt different in the morning light. Yesterday's amber emergency glow replaced by the full white precision of a building that had been restored, reset returned to its projected image of itself. Marble gleaming, security desk staffed by a different blazer than yesterday. The elevator banks, 4 of them, brushed steel, floor displays glowing, open and operational. Oliver pressed the button and waited. The doors opened. He stepped in. Pressed 3. The doors slid shut. He looked straight ahead. On the floor, almost invisible against the industrial carpet, was the impression of where 2 people had sat. You'd have to be looking for it to see it. You'd have to know it was there. Oliver knew it was there. He watched the floors count upward. Somewhere above him, on the 43rd floor, a woman who ran 900 people was starting her day. He had a network to audit. He pressed on. There are things about Oliver Mercer that the contractor badge did not say, things the building's security desk would not have known to look for and would not have found in any database they had access to. There was a facility in Virginia 9 years ago, where Oliver had spent 4 years as part of a team that did not officially exist doing work that was not officially described. The team was 8 people. Oliver was the youngest by 6 years. He had been recruited out of his master's program by a man in an unmarked car who said 4 sentences and waited, with great patience, for Oliver to understand what was being asked of him. Oliver had understood immediately. He had said yes. He had spent 4 years building systems that other systems couldn't see. Architecture so clean and so deep that the teams trying to find it, and there were teams, constantly trying to find it, could not locate the entry point. He had been very good at invisible things, at structures that held without showing their supports, at work that mattered and left no signature. He had left for reasons he still didn't discuss. He had taken his knowledge with him, which was permitted, and his clearance had been quietly maintained, which was unusual, and he had built a small, careful life that required almost none of what he had once been capable of. Almost none. The third floor's financial infrastructure was a problem. Not a dramatic problem, not an immediate threat. But Oliver had found, in the third day of his audit, a pattern in the security logs that did not fit the official architecture. A series of access requests from internal credentials that should not have been generating that kind of traffic at those hours. Someone inside this building was doing something they were not supposed to do, and they had been doing it carefully enough that 3 previous audits had missed it entirely. Oliver had not missed it. He set his coffee down and looked at the screen and felt, moving through him like a current through still water, the old particular satisfaction of finding the thing beneath the thing, the original problem beneath all the noise. He had always been good at this. He had just chosen, for 7 years, to use it quietly. She found him at lunch. Not deliberately, or at least not in a way she would have described as deliberate. She had come down to the 3rd floor for a meeting with the CFO that had run 20 minutes short, which left her standing in the hallway outside the conference room with the particular restlessness of someone whose schedule had been disrupted and whose mind moved too fast to wait without purpose. She was walking back toward the elevator when she saw him through the glass partition of the open-plan workspace, sitting at a corner workstation, back to the room, screen filled with cascading lines of code and what appeared to be a network visualization map, overlaid with a complex tangle of colored threads. She recognized the posture before she recognized the face, the particular stillness of someone who was not performing concentration, who actually had it. She stopped. She could not have said afterward exactly why she went in. "You found something," she said. He didn't startle. He registered her presence the way he registered most things, with a slight adjustment of attention, a reorientation the way a compass needle settles toward north. "Ms. Hale?" "Diana." She pulled up a chair, sat down without asking. "You found something. I can tell by the way you're looking at the screen." He looked at her. "How can you tell that?" "I've been running companies for 8 years. I know what it looks like when someone's found the actual problem and is deciding how to say it." He held her gaze for a moment, then turned back to the screen. "Your internal security logs have an anomaly. Access pattern that doesn't match the registered architecture. It's been running for approximately 11 months. She was still. Meaning? Meaning someone with valid credentials is accessing systems they're not supposed to access, at hours that don't match their assigned work patterns, from terminals that shouldn't have that level of reach. He paused. Whoever set this up was careful. The trail is faint, but it's there. Diana looked at the screen. Her jaw was doing that thing it did when she was processing something she didn't want to be true. The slight tension at the hinge. The controlled stillness. He had cataloged that expression yesterday. He recognized it now. "You're sure?" she said. "No," he said. "I'm thorough. I'll be sure in another 2 days." She looked at him. "Do you brief the CFO on this?" "I brief whoever my contract is with. That's the Financial Systems Division VP. He paused. "But you're going to want your legal team ready before I file the report. If this is what it looks like, the exposure is significant." She absorbed that, the way she absorbed things, without visible reaction, which was not the same as without reaction. "Why are you telling me?" she said. "I'm not your client on this job." He was quiet for a moment. "Because you were going to find out eventually," he said. And it seemed better that you found out from someone who had no reason to manage what you did with it. She looked at him for a long time. Not the assessment look. Something else. You're a very strange contractor, Mr. Mercer. Oliver. And there it was again. That thing on her face that was not quite a smile and was not quite not. She came back at 3:15. He was still at the workstation. The map on his screen had grown more complex, more threads, more nodes, the colored tangle now annotated with timestamps and credential identifiers. He had his notebook open beside him. The handwriting small and precise. The kind of handwriting that suggested someone who had written a very large amount in tight spaces over a long period of time. She set a coffee down beside his notebook without a word. He looked at it, then at her. You looked like you needed it, she said. Neutral. Professional. He picked it up. Drank. She sat in the chair she'd pulled up 3 hours earlier, which was still there because no one had moved it, and looked at his screen with the expression of someone trying to understand a language they don't speak. Can you show me how you found it? You don't have to understand the technical details. I know I don't have to. She looked at him. Show me. He studied her face. Not long, just enough to confirm what he was reading. She wasn't asking for a presentation. She wasn't asking to be managed. She was asking, in the direct way of someone who had built a company by understanding things they didn't have to understand, to be shown the truth. He turned the screen slightly toward her. These are your normal access logs, he said. The rhythm is predictable. Business hours, standard credential rotation, expected traffic patterns. He pointed to a cluster of lines. This is the anomaly. Same pattern but offset, 2 hours later than it should be. Same credentials, different terminals, and these, he pointed to a thread of red connecting several nodes, are system queries that those credentials should not be able to generate. She leaned forward. Not far, just enough. What are they querying? HR records, compensation data, organizational charts. He paused. The kind of information you'd want if you were planning to approach key employees with competitive offers, or if you were building a dossier. She sat back. He watched her face run through something in the space of 4 seconds that most people would have taken 20 minutes to process. He had seen that before, that kind of mind. The kind that moved fast and accurately and made the calculation before most people had finished reading the problem. Who knows, she said. Right now, you and me. Your client on this job doesn't know yet. I haven't reported findings. I have preliminary indicators. I came to you with it because... He stopped. Because it felt right, he didn't say. Because you deserved to know before it became someone else's controlled narrative, he didn't say. Because it seemed like the right call, he said. She looked at him for a long time in the afternoon light from the window. I don't trust easily, she said. I know. You don't know me. I know enough to see that, he said. She was quiet. Why? She said finally. Not asking about the security issue, asking something else. He knew she was asking something else. He looked at his screen, then back at her. Because I've been the person on the wrong side of information being managed, he said. Quiet, steady. I know what it costs. I didn't want to do that to you. Diana Hale looked at this man, this quiet, spare man in a contractor badge sitting at a corner workstation in a company he'd been hired for 1 week, drinking cold coffee and finding the things that 3 professional audits had missed, and felt something shift in her chest. Not dramatically, not the way it happened in movies. Quietly, the way a door settles open when the wind changes direction. She didn't acknowledge it. She was very good at not acknowledging things. But the shift happened, and she knew, with the same precision she brought to everything, that she would not be able to unshift it. He left at 5. He always left at 5. The woman at the security desk, and a different one from the morning, with a kind face and reading glasses on a beaded chain, waved him through without checking his badge. He'd become, in 3 days, a recognized quantity. The quiet one with the laptop bag who always said thank you and always held the door. He walked 6 blocks to the parking structure, took the stairs to the 3rd level, found his car, A 10-year-old Civic with a new alternator and a backseat occupied by Ethan's spare backpack, a library book 2 weeks overdue, and 3 distinct drawings of what appeared to be a robot fighting a volcano, and sat for a moment before starting the engine. He thought about the anomaly in the system, about the red thread, about 11 months of careful, quiet intrusion that had managed to stay invisible through 3 previous audits. He thought about Diana Hale's face when she understood what it meant. He thought about the fact that she'd come back at 3 in the afternoon and brought him a coffee. He started the car, pulled out into traffic. He had 40 minutes before he needed to pick up Ethan, which was enough time to stop at the grocery for the ingredients his son had requested for what was being called the biggest volcano yet. Vinegar, baking soda, red food coloring, and for reasons Ethan had been unwilling to fully explain, glitter. Oliver merged onto the avenue. The city moved around him, indifferent and enormous. He thought, someone inside that building has been stealing something for 11 months. He thought, I'm going to find out exactly who. He thought for just a moment about amber light and the sound of controlled breathing becoming something calmer. Then he thought about glitter and what it was going to do to his kitchen floor, and he drove. There are 2 kinds of men who are dangerous. The first kind knows he is dangerous and wants you to know it. He wears it, performs it, needs it to be witnessed. He is loud in the way that emptiness is loud, all echo, no source. The second kind has put it down, set it aside deliberately, the way you set down something heavy not because you couldn't carry it, but because you chose to carry something else instead. He has learned, through things he does not discuss, what he is capable of, and he has chosen every morning to be something different, something smaller and more important, something that serves the boy down the hall instead of the operations that once needed him. The first kind is dangerous because he can't stop. The second kind is dangerous because he can. Oliver Mercer was the second kind. And somewhere in the 31st floor financial systems division of a 43-story tower, a thread of red was waiting for him. He didn't know yet who it led to, but he would find out. That was never really the question. The question was what he would do when he did. And that, for now, was a question for another day. And a man who had a 7-year-old to put to bed first and a kitchen floor to protect from glitter. And a life that was small and hard and chosen and entirely, completely his. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that belongs only to men who hold things alone. Not the exhaustion of the body, though that is real too, and Oliver knew it in his back and his wrists and in the slight ache behind his eyes at 11 p.m. when the laptop was still open and the apartment was finally quiet. The exhaustion he was thinking about was the other kind. The kind that lives in the part of you that is always calculating, always accounting, always running the quiet arithmetic of a life that has no margin for error. The kind that comes from being the only person standing between a 7-year-old boy and the world's indifference. Men of a certain generation understood this without being told. Their fathers had understood it. Their grandfathers had understood it before that. The specific weight of being the one who does not get to put it down, who does not get to come home to someone who shares the calculation, who wakes at 3 a.m. not from nightmare but from the sudden, acute awareness of everything that depends on his continued functioning, his health, his income, his presence, his steadiness, and who lies there in the dark and does the math again and finds that it still works, barely, if nothing goes wrong, and then gets up in the morning and makes breakfast. Oliver did the math every night. It still worked. Barely. The 4th day of the audit was a Thursday. Ethan had asked, on Wednesday night, about the word invisible. They had been reading the book about the boy who talked to machines, and there was a chapter where the boy made himself invisible so the bad people wouldn't see him. And Ethan had put his finger on the word and looked up at his father and said, "Dad, is invisible good or bad?" Oliver had thought about it seriously, the way he thought about Ethan's questions, not the way adults think about children's questions, as something to be answered quickly and moved past, but as actual questions, deserving actual consideration. "Depends on why you're invisible," he said. Ethan considered this with the profound solemnity of a 7-year-old engaging with philosophy. What if you're invisible because nobody looks at you? Oliver looked at his son. Then you're not really invisible, he said. You just haven't been seen yet. There's a difference. Ethan nodded slowly, filed it, moved on to the next page. Oliver looked at the wall of drawings. Me and Dad doing stuff. He was very visible to the person who mattered. That was enough. Thursday morning he found the second thread. It had been hidden inside a routine backup process, the kind of maintenance operation that runs automatically at 2 a.m. and generates no alerts and gets reviewed by no one because it has been running correctly for so long that correctness has become assumption. Oliver had not assumed. He had pulled the backup logs and read them the way a doctor reads a chart, not for what it said but for the specific way it said it, the rhythm of the entries, the places where the rhythm stuttered. It stuttered at 2:17 a.m. every Tuesday for 11 months. At 2:17 a.m. every Tuesday, the backup process paused for 11 seconds longer than it should have. 11 seconds was not enough time to trigger any automated alert. 11 seconds was nothing in a system that ran continuous background operations across thousands of nodes. 11 seconds was enough time if you knew what you were doing, to copy a targeted packet of data to an external address. Oliver stared at the screen for a long time. He pulled up the external address. It was a relay, a bounce point, designed to make the origin untraceable. The kind of relay that commercial security tools would flag as suspicious but not definitively malicious. The kind of thing that 3 previous audits would have noted, assessed and filed under monitor for recurrence. Oliver did not file things under monitor for recurrence. He followed the relay. It took him 4 hours and a methodology that he had not used in 7 years, that lived in a part of his mind he kept carefully behind a door. He kept carefully closed. Not locked. Never locked, because locked doors in a mind are just pressure waiting to find a crack. But closed, gently, deliberately. The door of a man who has made a choice about who he is going to be and intends to honor that choice. He opened it. Just enough. The relay resolved to a secondary relay. The secondary relay resolved to a tertiary point, which was better hidden, genuinely good tradecraft, the kind that suggested professional training rather than amateur sophistication. He cataloged that, noted it, followed. The third relay resolved to a registered LLC in Delaware. The LLC had one director. Oliver wrote the name in his notebook. Small, precise handwriting. Looked at it for a moment. Then he closed the notebook. He needed to verify before he said anything to anyone. He needed to be certain, not thorough. He had told Diana 2 days. He would have it in 2 days. He would have it sooner. He picked up his coffee. It was cold again. He drank it anyway. She found him at lunch again. He was beginning to understand that this was going to be a pattern. Not because she had decided it was a pattern. He did not think Diana Hale made decisions like that consciously, which was perhaps part of what made her effective and perhaps part of what had made the last few years difficult for her in ways she had not shared with him, and he had not asked about. But because the building had a particular rhythm, and the 3rd floor was on her path to the CFO's office, and the CFO's office was where she spent an increasing portion of her time as the company moved through its current strategic cycle, and stopping at a workstation on the way was a thing that required only a slight deviation from an existing route. She brought coffee again. He looked at it. Looked at her. You didn't have to, he said. I know. She sat down. Did you find more? He considered how much to say. Not from evasion. He had already decided, in the quiet way he decided most things, that he was going to be honest with her about what he found. The consideration was about sequence, about not giving her pieces she couldn't contextualize without the whole. I'm close, he said. She looked at his screen, at the notebook, closed, beside the keyboard. You write things down, she said. By hand. Old habit. From what? He looked at her. The question was direct, not aggressive. She was not an aggressive person, he was learning, but direct. The directness of someone who had learned, perhaps by being managed around the truth too many times, to ask things plainly. "From a job I used to have," he said, "where the notes had to be in a format that certain systems couldn't read." She absorbed that. "What kind of job requires that?" He looked at her steadily. "The kind I don't talk about at lunch." A beat. And then, there, the thing on her face. This time it lasted longer, a full 2 seconds, which was, he was discovering, a significant duration for Diana Hale. "Fair enough," she said. She drank her coffee. He drank his. Outside the glass partition, the open plan office did its midday thing, the particular loosening of a workforce between morning intensity and afternoon push. Voices a register higher, chairs pushed back, the small social negotiations of people who spend most of their waking hours in proximity. Neither of them looked at it. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "You're going to anyway." Another 2-second smile. "Your son, Ethan." He looked at her. "You mentioned him on the phone. You said your schedule was built around his." She paused. "That's not something most people lead with." "It's the most important fact about my life," he said. "It seems relevant to lead with it." She was quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that had texture to it, that contained something she was deciding whether to say. "What's he like?" she said. It was not the question he expected. He had expected something more transactional. "How do you manage childcare with contract work? Or does his mother share custody?" The questions people asked when they were trying to understand the logistics. Diana had skipped the logistics entirely and gone straight to the human. He thought about how to answer it honestly. "He's very serious about volcanoes," Oliver said. "He has a theory that the reason volcanoes are impressive is because they've been holding everything in for a very long time, and eventually they have to let it out." He paused. "He's 7. He came up with that himself." Diana looked at him. "He sounds like someone who pays attention," she said. "He does." Oliver looked at his coffee. He got that somewhere. The silence between them settled into something that was not uncomfortable. That had, in fact, a quality he was finding increasingly difficult to name. A quality of two people who were not performing anything for each other. Not managing impressions, not deploying the social machinery that most interactions required. Just present, in the same space, letting it be what it was. She left after 20 minutes. He watched her walk back through the glass partition, watched the way she reassembled herself as she moved, the slight squaring of shoulders, the recomposition of the executive posture, the careful restoration of the armor that had been, for 20 minutes at a third-floor workstation, mostly unnecessary. He understood armor. He wore his own. The difference was that his was built for endurance, and hers, he was beginning to think, was built in response to wounds that were still present. Still working on her. He thought about that for a moment. Then he opened the notebook, wrote the name again, below the first time. Looked at it. The name was familiar in a way that reached past this building and this job and this careful small life, and touched something in the back of his memory where old operational data lived in the particular cold storage of a mind that had been trained to retain what it processed. He had seen this name before, not in this context, not in this city. In a file. 9 years ago. In a building in Virginia that did not appear on any public directory. He sat very still for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and sent a text to a number he had not used in 4 years. 3 words. No greeting, no explanation. Need a confirmation. He set the phone face down on the desk. Waited. Within 6 minutes, the phone buzzed once. He read the reply. Set the phone back down. Looked at the name in his notebook. Said nothing, because there was no one to say anything to. But inside the carefully closed door of a room he did not often visit, something old and precise and very quiet moved into position. He picked up Ethan at 5. The boy had had what Mrs. Cafferty described as a creative afternoon, which Oliver had learned to interpret as a euphemism for sustained chaos. Ethan was currently wearing what appeared to be a paint-based interpretation of a volcanic eruption across the front of his shirt. and had the satisfied expression of someone who had accomplished exactly what he set out to accomplish. "We made mountains," Ethan said, on the walk to the car. "I can see that." Mine erupted the most. Did it erupt on Marcus again? A pause. Only a little. Oliver looked down at his son. Ethan looked up with the specific expression of a child waiting to determine how much trouble he was in, which was a look Oliver had memorized in all its variations. The genuine contrition version, the performative contrition version, and this version, which was the "I regret the consequences but not the actions" version. "Did Marcus mind?" Oliver asked. He laughed. "Then it sounds like a good afternoon," Oliver said. Ethan grabbed his father's hand, swung it once the way children do, an expression of something too large for words, compressed into a physical gesture, a single swing of a joined hand that meant everything is fine, and you are here, and the world is the right size. Oliver held his son's hand. They walked to the car. The city moved around them, indifferent and enormous. They were in it entirely sufficient. Friday morning. Oliver arrived at 7:50, earlier than his usual 8:20, because he wanted the workstation before the floor filled up. He wanted quiet, and he wanted the full screen, and he wanted the particular focus that came from being the first person in a space, the specific clarity that silence before noise provides. When the problems on your screen are not competing with the ambient evidence of other people's days. He had the name. He had the relay chain. He had, from last night's 3 hours after Ethan went to bed, a third piece. A correlation between the access pattern anomaly and a series of external events. Competitor announcements. Strategic shifts. 2 personnel departures from Diana's company in the last 8 months that had seemed unremarkable at the time, and were now, in context, anything but. Someone had been feeding information out of this building for nearly a year, and the destination, traced through 3 relays and a Delaware LLC and a confirmation from a number he hadn't used in 4 years, connected back to a man named Richard Voss, who was currently the chief strategy officer of a competing firm, who had, and this was the part Oliver had stared at for a long time the previous night, spent 2 years at the same government contractor that Oliver had worked for, 3 years before Oliver arrived, doing work that was adjacent to but not inside Oliver's team. Voss had washed out. Oliver had read the file once, briefly, in a context that had seemed irrelevant at the time. He remembered the broad shape of it. A man who had the technical skills and none of the judgment, who understood systems but not consequence, who had been let go not with drama, but with the quiet administrative efficiency of an organization that could not afford what he was. Oliver had wondered sometimes what happened to people like that. Now he knew. They went private, used what they knew, turned capability without conscience into a career. He opened his notebook, began writing the formal summary. Not the report yet, not the filing, but the sequenced account that would become the report. Small, precise handwriting. The shape of what had happened, when it had happened, what it meant. He was on the 3rd page when the door to the conference room beside the workstation opened and Diana Hale walked out. Not the CFO meeting. That was Monday. She was alone, carrying her tablet, moving with the particular energy of someone who had been sitting in one place thinking for a long time and needed to move. She saw him through the glass, stopped, came in. "You're early," she said. "So are you." She looked at his notebook, at the 3 pages of small writing, at his face, which was composed but had something in it, something she had not seen in 3 days of watching this man, something that was not quite urgency and not quite weight, but was in that family. She sat down. "Tell me," she said. He looked at her. She met it without flinching. He told her. He told her about the relay chain, about the 11 seconds every Tuesday, about the Delaware LLC, about Richard Voss, and what Voss had been taking, and what he had likely done with it. The 2 personnel departures, the competitor announcements timed to internal strategic decisions. The organizational chart data that would have given a rival a precise map of who could be approached and how. He told her everything except the confirmation that had come from the number he hadn't used in 4 years. That part he kept, not from deception, from something else. From the understanding that there were doors in a life that you kept closed for reasons, and that opening them fully, even for someone you were beginning to trust, required more time than 3 days. She listened the way she did everything, completely, without interrupting, with the focused attention of someone who understood that the first time you hear something is the only time you hear it without the contamination of your own response. When he finished, she was quiet for 30 seconds. Then, "How long have you known about Voss?" "Since yesterday afternoon." "And you waited until this morning." "I needed to verify. And I needed to think about how to tell you in a way that gave you room to respond instead of react." She looked at him. "There's a difference," she said. "There's always a difference," he said. She sat back in the chair. The composure was intact, the surface of it the professional shell, but underneath, he could see the actual work happening, the assessment, the calculation, the rapid, accurate mind running through what this meant for her company, her people, the 8 months of strategy that had been compromised. 11 people left in the last year, she said quietly, more to herself than to him. "I thought it was the market. I thought—" She stopped. He waited. "I thought I was doing something wrong," she said. "That I'd miscalibrated, that the culture had shifted and I'd missed it." She paused. "I spent 6 months adjusting things that didn't need to be adjusted, trying to fix a problem that wasn't mine to fix." Oliver said nothing, because there was nothing to say that would be more useful than the silence. She looked at him, and this time it was not the assessment look, and it was not the almost smile, and it was not the recalibrated professional gaze. It was something more direct than any of those, something that had dropped below the surface. "How did you find this when 3 audits didn't?" she said. He held her gaze. "Because I knew what to look for," he said. "Why?" And here was the door. He felt it. The specific weight of a closed door when the right question has been asked in front of it. He looked at his notebook, at the 3 pages of small, precise writing. "I need you to understand something," he said. "What I'm about to tell you is not something I tell people, not because I'm ashamed of it, because it's mine, and I'm careful about what I share and who I share it with." He looked at her. "I'm telling you because you asked directly and you deserve a direct answer. And because—" He stopped. She waited. "Because you've been operating without information that might have helped you," he said. "And I know what that costs." He told her about Virginia. Not everything. Not the specific operations, not the technical architecture of what his team had built, not the names of the 7 other people who had sat in that facility for 4 years doing work that officially did not exist. Those things were still sealed, and would remain sealed, and were not his to give. But the shape of it, the outline, the fact of it. He had been recruited at 23 from a graduate program in computer science at a university he named without drama. He had spent 4 years in a facility that specialized in what he described simply as infrastructure nobody could see. He had been very good at it. He had been the best, in fact, though he said this without pride, with the flat matter-of-factness of someone stating a specification rather than a distinction. He told her about the moment he left, not the full story, not yet, but the essential shape of it, that Ethan's mother had been gone for a year by then, gone in a way that left no room for Oliver to be both what the facility needed and what a 3-year-old boy needed, and that when the calculation resolved, it resolved clearly. A child is not an abstraction. A child does not wait for your operational cycle to complete. A child is a person who needs you present and continuous and real, not arriving home in the dark carrying things you cannot name. He had made the choice. He had taken what he was permitted to take, his knowledge, his clearance, which they had quietly maintained, and the discipline of a man who had learned what he was capable of and how to be careful with it, and he had built a small, careful life. He had audited networks. He had packed lunches. He had read about volcanoes. He had been every morning the kind of man that Ethan would grow up watching, not the kind of man that briefing rooms needed. The kind a boy needed. Present, consistent, steady, honest. He stopped talking. The office was fully occupied now. The ambient noise of other people's days had filled the space around them while he talked, and the glass partition had the quality of an aquarium wall. All the motion outside, all the stillness inside. Diana Hale sat across from him and did not say anything for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was different. Not unprofessional, but lower, unguarded in a way that he had not heard it before. "You gave all of that up," she said. "For him. I didn't give it up." He was clear about this. "I chose something else." "There's a difference?" He looked at her steadily. "There's always a difference," he said. And the echo of what she'd said to him was deliberate, and she heard it, and something in her face acknowledged it. "He doesn't know," she said. "He's 7. When will you tell him?" Oliver looked at the wall of the conference room, which was glass, and beyond it the open floor, and beyond that the window, and beyond that the city. "When he needs to know," he said. "When the knowing would serve him, not me." He paused. "There's a difference between a father who keeps things from his son and a father who waits until his son is ready to hold them. I intend to be the second kind." Diana looked at him. For a long time, and then quietly, in a voice that had no professional armor in it at all. "Who are you?" He looked back at her. "A contractor," he said. "3rd floor. 1 more day on the job." But they both knew that was not what she had asked. And they both knew that whatever she had actually asked, the answer was something neither of them was quite ready to name yet. He filed the report at 2 p.m. to the Financial Systems Division VP, as his contract required. A formal document, precise and complete, with the relay chain documented, the credential anomaly mapped, the timeline reconstructed, the Delaware LLC identified, and a clear recommendation for the next steps: internal investigation, legal counsel, coordination with the relevant authorities. He did not name Richard Voss in the formal filing. He named him in a separate document, which he sent to Diana Hale's direct email with a single line of text: "For your eyes first. Then your legal team. Then however you choose to proceed." Her response came 4 minutes later. 2 words. "Thank you." He read it, set the phone down, stood up from the workstation for the first time in 6 hours, stretched, walked to the window at the end of the 3rd floor corridor, and stood looking out at the city in the late afternoon light, that particular October light that makes steel buildings look almost warm, almost human, almost like they were built by people who cared what they looked like from the street. He thought about Richard Voss, who had taken something he hadn't built and sold it to someone who hadn't earned it, and who had been careful and patient and thorough about it, and who was, as of this afternoon, going to learn what it felt like when someone more careful and more patient and more thorough found the thread. He thought about Diana Hale, who had spent 6 months adjusting things that didn't need to be adjusted, trying to fix a problem that wasn't hers to fix, carrying the weight of a system's compromise as if it were her failure. He thought about the particular injustice of that, of competent, serious people absorbing the cost of other people's dishonesty and concluding that the problem was in themselves. He had seen that before. He was glad, quietly and specifically, to have been the one to find it. He went back to the workstation, packed his bag, said goodbye to the woman at the security desk who had stopped asking for his badge on the 2nd day. He took the stairs. He always took the stairs. The call came on Saturday morning. Ethan was in the kitchen, deeply committed to what he was calling Phase 2 of the Volcano Project, which appeared to involve a cardboard structure of impressive architectural ambition and a quantity of aluminum foil that Oliver had not authorized. Oliver was at the table with coffee, not preventing any of this, because the project was keeping Ethan quietly focused and the kitchen was already a loss. The number was Diana's. He looked at it for a moment, then stepped out to the hallway, where the sound of Ethan's construction narration was slightly muffled. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning." Her voice had the quality of someone who had not slept much and was not bothered by it, the voice of someone who had spent the night doing something important and had no regrets about the cost. "Voss resigned this morning." Oliver was quiet. My legal team was thorough, she said. His attorney called it 7. He's agreed to a full accounting of what was passed and to whom, in exchange for us not going further. She paused. We're going further anyway. Good, Oliver said. The 2 people who left, I've spoken to both of them. The approaches Voss's firm made were based directly on the data he stole. They didn't know where the information came from. They thought the competitor simply knew the market well. She was quiet for a moment. One of them is coming back. Good, he said again. Silence on the line. Not the tense silence of the elevator. Something different. Wider. The silence of 2 people who have been through something and are standing on the other side of it, looking at what it was. I've been thinking about what you said, she said. About choosing something instead of giving something up. He waited. I built this company the same way, she said. Not because I had to, because I chose to. Because I decided a long time ago that this was the thing I wanted to build and I was willing to pay what it cost. She paused. I haven't always been certain it was the right choice. Is it? He said. Ask me again in 10 years. Something in his chest shifted. Slightly. The way a door settles. Oliver. Her voice was careful. Deliberate. The voice of someone choosing words the way you choose steps on uncertain ground. Not from fear, but from attention. I'd like to take you and Ethan to dinner. Not, this isn't. She stopped. Started again. I'm not good at this. I know, he said. I'm trying anyway. He looked at the kitchen doorway. From where he stood, he could hear Ethan narrating the structural challenges of his volcano to an audience of 1. The problem is the lava has to go somewhere, and if the walls are too thick, the pressure builds up and then… Saturday evenings are complicated, Oliver said. He has a routine. Sunday lunch, she said immediately. Somewhere with a long menu. He can tell me about volcanoes. Oliver looked at the ceiling. He will tell you about volcanoes, he said, at length. I'm prepared for that. You're not. I'm prepared to be unprepared, she said. And this time the smile was in her voice fully. Undisguised, without armor, clear as a note struck on a clean string. Is that enough? He thought about it. He thought about a woman pressed flat against the wall of an elevator, breathing in that careful way, holding herself together by will, and the same woman 2 days later, sitting at a 3rd-floor workstation with 2 coffees, asking him to show her the actual problem instead of the managed version of it. And the same woman yesterday, listening to things he did not tell people and not managing her response, not filing it somewhere useful, not converting it into an asset, just receiving it, just letting it be true. He thought about what it cost her to make this call. He knew what it cost. He recognized the weight of reaching toward someone when reaching was not your natural motion, when your natural motion had been refined by years into self-sufficiency, because self-sufficiency was what the work demanded and what the losses had reinforced. He recognized it because he lived it. Sunday lunch, he said. Somewhere with a kid's menu. He's particular about his chicken. Noted. And bring a question about volcanoes. He responds well to people who have done their research. A pause. Then, are you telling me to do homework? I'm telling you he'll know if you haven't. He's 7. He's very 7, Oliver said. And her laugh, real, unguarded, entirely unperformed, the laugh of a person caught off guard by something genuinely surprising, came through the phone and into the quiet hallway of Oliver's 4th-floor apartment, and it was a sound he had not been expecting, and it was a sound that settled something in him. Gently, the way things settle when they find their right place. There are men the world never writes stories about, not because their stories aren't worth telling, because the telling requires the world to look at something it has trained itself to look past, something quiet, something without flash or announcement, something that does its work in the margins, that holds its dignity without demanding witnesses, that raises its children without requiring applause. Oliver Mercer was that kind of man. He had been something extraordinary once, in a way that the world would never know. He had been recruited by people who looked for the rarest combination, the mind that could build invisible things, and the character that would build them in service of something beyond itself, He had been in a sealed room in Virginia, one of 8 people who shaped systems that shaped outcomes that shaped the conditions of lives that would never know his name. And he had walked away from that. Not because he couldn't do it, because he had found something that needed him more. The boy in the kitchen, the volcano project, the creak of step 14, the ritual at the school gate, hug, wave, go, the library book, 2 weeks overdue, the drawings on the wall, the cold coffee, and the late nights and the math that barely worked and the morning. Every morning of getting up and doing it again. Not because anyone was watching, but because a 7-year-old boy deserved a father who showed up. He had chosen this. He had chosen this with everything he had. And if the world had looked at him and seen a contractor badge and a laptop bag and a 10-year-old Civic and nothing worth a second glance, well, the world had always been bad at that particular kind of accounting. Sunday lunch was at a place with large wooden tables and a menu that was 4 pages long and a kids section that included a chicken dish Ethan approved of after significant scrutiny. Diana arrived before them. Oliver saw her through the window as he and Ethan crossed the street. She was at a table near the back, reading something on her phone, and she looked different out of the building, less armored, or armored differently, weekend armor instead of boardroom armor, which is still armor but of a lighter grade. She was wearing something that was not a blazer, which was the first time he had seen that, and she looked younger. And she looked, he thought, like someone trying. Ethan saw her at the same time. "Is that her?" he said. "That's her." "She looks like a boss," Ethan said. "She is a boss." "Cool." He considered this for a moment, with the philosophical openness of a child who has not yet learned to find power intimidating. "Does she know about volcanoes?" "She's been doing research." Ethan looked up at his father with an expression that contained, in equal measure, skepticism and delight. "Dad, nobody does research about volcanoes for fun." "Some people do," Oliver said. They went inside. Diana looked up, saw them, and her face did something that Oliver noted and did not comment on. It opened slightly in a way that was involuntary and entirely unguarded, before the professional composure reinstalled itself. It was a half-second, maybe less. The kind of thing you had to be paying close attention to see. He had been paying close attention. Ethan walked up to the table and sat down across from her with the directness of a child who has been raised by a man who does not waste time on performance. "My dad says you did research," Ethan said. Diana looked at him seriously. "I did. What kind of volcano is the most powerful?" A pause. Oliver watched her. She had in fact done research. He could tell by the way she reached for the answer with confidence rather than apology. "Supervolcano," she said. "Yellowstone. Hasn't erupted for 600,000 years." She paused. "But it's not dead." Ethan stared at her. Then he looked at his father. Then he looked back at her. "You actually did research," he said, with considerable reverence. "I actually did research," she said. Ethan picked up his menu, with the air of someone who had just significantly upgraded their assessment of a new acquaintance. "I'm getting the chicken," he said. "You should get the chicken too." Across the table, Oliver watched his son explain, with great technical precision and considerable passion, the internal pressure dynamics of a volcanic chamber, using the salt and pepper shakers as a model, and the breadbasket as a proxy for the Earth's mantle. Diana Hale, who ran 900 people, who had navigated boardrooms and hostile acquisitions and a year of invisible compromise. Diana Hale listened with the focused attention she brought to everything, asked follow-up questions that demonstrated she had, in fact, done real research, and at one point leaned forward over the salt shaker volcano model with the expression of someone who was genuinely interested in what a 7-year-old was telling her. Oliver drank his coffee. It was warm. He looked at the two of them across the table, the boy who had been his entire world for 7 years, explaining the world to someone new, the woman who had walked into a stopped elevator and, without meaning to, walked into something else. And he felt, in the particular quiet space behind the math and the schedules and the carefully maintained margins, the specific warmth of something he had not allowed himself to feel in a very long time. Not hope exactly. He was a careful man, and hope was not a careful word. Something more precise than hope. More specific. The feeling of a calculation that, for once, showed more than enough. He had held things alone for a long time. Not because no one was available, because the work required it, and because Ethan required a father who was present and stable, and because Oliver understood from experience the difference between someone who was available and someone who was worthy of what you were building. He was beginning to think, carefully, precisely with the measured pace of a man who had learned the cost of moving wrong, that he might be looking at someone in the second category. They walked to the park afterward. Ethan ran ahead on the path, narrating something to himself, arms out, becoming in his imagination something larger and faster than a 7-year-old boy. The October light made everything golden and slightly unreal, the way good light does, the way it makes ordinary things look like they were composed by someone who cared. Diana walked beside Oliver, not close, not the way people walk when they are trying to signal something, just beside him, at the natural distance of two people who are comfortable in each other's presence and are not requiring anything of each other except that presence. "He's remarkable," she said. "I know," Oliver said. "He gets it from you." He looked at her. "The way he pays attention," she said. "The way he asks questions and then actually waits for the answer. The way he treated my research like it mattered." She paused. "That's not accidental. That's something he learned." Oliver watched his son run across the grass ahead of them, arms still out. The specific freedom of a child in an open space, the body's understanding of room. "I've made a lot of mistakes," Oliver said. "As a father, I've gotten things wrong. There have been days where I didn't have enough left at the end of them, and he could tell, and I couldn't hide it and didn't try. And I've wondered whether that cost him something." He paused. "But I showed up. Every day. Whatever I had left, it was his." He looked ahead. "I think that's the part that holds." Diana was quiet. "The part that holds," she said, quietly, turning it over. "The part that doesn't change regardless of what's left. The core thing. The commitment underneath all the days when you don't have enough." He paused. "If a child knows that exists, if they can feel it, I think they can weather the rest." She walked beside him and said nothing, but she stayed beside him, and the distance between them, which had been the natural distance of two careful people, decreased slightly, not dramatically, not with announcement, just the natural closing of space between two people who have been, for a moment, entirely honest with each other. At the park gate, on the way out, Ethan took his father's hand. Then he looked at Diana. With the directness of a child who has not yet learned to want permission for things his instincts tell him are right. He held out his other hand. Diana looked at it. Oliver watched her face, the split second of something that was not hesitation but recognition, the moment before a person takes something they have been waiting for without knowing they were waiting. She took Ethan's hand. The three of them walked through the gate. The city moved around them, enormous and indifferent as always. They were in it something entirely their own. There are things that do not announce themselves, that do not arrive with ceremony or signal, that do not come in the form of grand gestures or declared moments, that come instead in the accumulated weight of small things. A coffee brought without being asked, a question answered honestly when the easier answer was available, a child extending a hand, the distance between two careful people decreasing slowly, by natural law, the way things move toward each other when the conditions are finally right. Oliver Mercer had carried enough, for long enough, to know what it felt like when the weight shifted, when the balance changed, when the calculation resolved not to barely enough but to more than enough, just enough more that you could feel the difference in your hands. He felt it now. Walking through a park on a Sunday in October with his son on one side and a woman who had, somewhere between an amber-lit elevator and a third-floor workstation, and a lunch that ran 3 hours because nobody wanted to leave, become something he did not have a word for yet. He would find the word. He was not in a hurry. He had a son who was currently describing the geological history of Central Park at significant volume. He had a woman beside him who was listening with the focused attention she brought to everything, asking follow-up questions, doing what she always did, paying real attention to the real thing in front of her. He had, as he always had, exactly enough. He had, for the first time in a long time, more than that. The city moved around them. They walked. And the particular quiet between two people who are no longer strangers and not yet whatever comes next. That quiet settled over the three of them like the October light, golden and specific and entirely real. Oliver held his son's hand. His son held Diana's hand. The chain was small. It was enough. It was, in the way of all things that hold, more than enough.